Welcome to the MCAP American Government Scoring Rubrics video. This video is designed as an initial introduction into the MCAP scoring process. The video will discuss the basics of scoring and resources around scoring. In the MCAP government, we use two types of scoring rubrics, the 4-point content rubric and the 5-point EBUS rubric. Both can be found on the MCAP government assessment page via the Maryland Public Schools website. For quick access, the URL and a QR code have been provided for you on the screen. What is the purpose of a rubric on a standardized test? First, it's important to note that the MCAP government assessment program uses holistic rubrics to guide the evaluation of the student work. In a holistic rubric, each score point is clearly defined. It does this by providing a framework for what is expected in a student response. It is also important to note that the rubric provides for a range of responses within a given score point. So there is variance within each given score point. For the MCAP government assessment, the ranges of acceptability for each of the score points is determined by a group of Maryland teachers during a process called range finding. When using the rubrics, it's important to remember the differences between everyday grading in your classroom and standardized scoring. When grading, it's being done for your classroom, so it's on a small scale. It evaluates the knowledge of what was taught in your classroom, and you are aware of the specific expectations for your students and your room. Ultimately, grading establishes a grade for the student, but it is also a tool to provide opportunities for formative feedback. When scoring, it's done on a much larger scale. It is for a statewide assessment that determines yearly progress or end of course progress in American government's case. It is based on standardized expectations where scores are created for statewide populations, and it provides summative data. With those ideas in mind, let's take a quick look at each of the scoring rubrics used on the MCAP government. Here's an example of a brief constructed response item, or a BCR. This is a content-based question. Students must answer 3 bullets of information that have the student applying the content knowledge and using specific examples and details to support their answer. These are scored with a 4-point rubric. Here's the 4-point rubric used when scoring the BCRs. Notice the variations amongst the score points. This helps to show the expectations for the students at each score point. But keep in mind, this is a holistic rubric, so it's not just a checklist. There are variations within each of the levels. To help better understand this aspect of scoring, sample responses are always helpful. We're going to look at some scoring resources for the 4-point rubric. The resource we will be using is the MSDE item bank, iTempora. The QR code on the screen or URL itempora.org/public will bring you to the home page of the public access site of iTempora. Feel free to pause the video to navigate to the item bank and follow along. If you click on the American Government folder, you will see several subfolders. The subfolders bring you to all the released SRs and CRs. Below, we have several CRs that have student responses. Japanese internment camp and opportunity costs are the 2 sample BCRs. As a side note, we are currently moving all of the CRs that were once housed on the MDK-12 assessment webpage to the iTempora item bank. During This process, any CRs that have anchor sets and sample items will be ported over and placed on this site. So this list will eventually grow to have more CR items available with anchor sets and samples. If you click on the Opportunity Cost tab, this is the BCR layout. This BCR has a stimulus that students must interact with to answer the 3 bullets. Below the BCR, you can find the scoring rubric, the responses or the anchor items, and some sample practice papers. For the responses or anchor sets, you'll see in parentheses the score of the item. So we have a 4-point rubric with the BCR. So here's a sample of, this is the anchor for a 0, an anchor for the 1, anchor for the level 2, an anchor paper for a level 3, and an anchor paper for the level 4. When you click on one of the responses, you will see the student response, the score point, and then the annotation. And this is according to the rubric and the language in the rubric, why this student response would receive a score 0.3. Here is an example of an eBus as it is displayed on the testing platform. The eBus are narrowly assessing skills and not content. The eBus is designed to assess the 6.0 Maryland Social Studies standard skills and processes. In the eBus constructed response, students must answer the compelling question using the sources provided to support their claim. This is the 5-point rubric used for our CR in the eBus item. Even though the 5-point rubric is assessing skills, you will notice that it is still a holistic rubric. The first bullet addresses the student's need for a claim. The second bullet addresses how the student is supporting the claim by using the evidence from the sources. Take a moment to look at the variations amongst the score points. Let's navigate back to iTempora. Feel free to just listen or have an additional tab open to click along. Now we are going to navigate to the NAFTA eBus item. The Open Primaries eBus at this time does not have any student responses connected to it. In this eBus item, you are going to notice more in this window. It is going to show you all of the sources associated with the eBus and all of the SRs. In this case, the CR is the last question. If you're not familiar with the NAFTA eBus, prior to reviewing the anchors, you are going to want to take a few moments to engage with the sources to better understand the anchors and practice paper. By clicking on a question, by clicking on question 6, you are going to see a similar screen to the BCR. This time it has the compelling question and 3 bullets to direct and support the student while answering the compelling question. You will also notice the alignment between these bullets as well as the bullets on the rubric. You will notice the anchors for each of the score points. Now there is an additional anchor since this scoring rubric has 5 points. And you're also going to see the practice papers associated with this rubric. This time, I'm going to show you what happens when you click on a practice paper. Here is the student response. If you click on the tab that says scoring, you will then see the score point and explanation of the score point. This is a good practice activity to better understand the 5-point rubric. Always start with the anchor papers to help familiarize with the item and the rubric expectations. Then score the practice items to see if you're calibrated with the rubric. Thank you for listening. Please make sure you go to the iTemper item bank to further explore the SRs and CR items. If you have any additional questions, please check out our website. And if you are on Twitter, please be sure to follow us.